Hey everybody, welcome back to PC Perspective, The Next Generation, Season 2. Some of you will get that.
Oh, it is Season 2, isn't it?
I'm Jim Tanis.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
I'm Sebastian P. We're not really going in order. I'm looking at the screen here. But
Yeah, we should.
I'm Brett Van Sproonberg, and I don't tweet.
And he doesn't tweet. And I neglected
Charlie,
to mention,
don't tweet.
This is episode 587, being recorded on a Wednesday. Yeah, a Wednesday, May 20th, 2020. So
here's the thing: the FPU was integrated with that series of chips, the 5th generation, whether it was from AMD, Cyrix, Intel.
Yeah.
So you didn't have a coprocessor anymore. I mean, you still had it with the 486 because the 486SX didn't have that floating point.
No.
So you could buy
DX
a floating
did.
point chip. What's that? The DX did. Yes, you're absolutely correct. And then Pentium, of course, had that
what did they call that thing?
Stage thing.
Superscalar.
It's a fully pipelined floating point, and and AMD, their K6, it was not fully pipelined, but it was extremely low latency. And
very low.
It wasn't great for gaming. It wasn't great altogether for a lot of stuff. But it was low latency.
I bet you don't have an FP coprocessor by your desk. 387, 587.
No, I've never had a coprocessor.
Did they sell 587 coprocessors? Or
I
like
don't
you
know.
said,
It was-
they already had them integrated.
No, they didn't.
Yeah, it wasn't many 587.
All
I had
the
them for
5th generation
Motorola.
stuff.
I had them for the Motorola CPUs. So a few of them.
Yeah, but
Yep.
Motorola crap.
Well, the
68,000.
bits were in the right order. All right, so there.
Yes.
Well,
Big
Little Indian.
Little Indian.
Little Indian.
Yeah.
I'll tell you where you can stick that little Indian.
I like
Sure
big
can.
ends, and I cannot lie.
speaking of
Jim,
crap,
now's the time. Put up a
Welcome.
sign.
welcome to the show. I told you I don't have the sign. I don't have the disclaimer.
Before we proceed, Jim,
Yeah.
we need to talk to Josh. This is a Wednesday. We're finally having the podcast on a Wednesday. Josh, did you have a burger today?
I did have a burger today. It was called the Popper. It was 2 quarter-pound patties, so a half pound of beef, cream cheese, candied jalapenos, and a raspberry chipotle sauce with a brioche bun.
I have one
fantastic.
question. I like the idea of the candied jalapenos because it offsets the hotness of the jalapeno.
Yeah.
Now, what was the chipotle sauce again? It was another
Raspberry chipotle.
So was it too sweet? Do you think? Was it just right?
No. It was just it was a little bit of that raspberry sweetness, but at the same time the raspberry tartness, and so it offset it nicely with kind of the acid, and it was a very well balanced burger, and you could still actually taste the beef, which is nice because that's why you order a burger.
Yeah.
It wasn't just that flavor wasn't covered up by everything else, and it all just played nicely against each other, and it was a very fulfilling burger, and well worth the $9 I paid for it.
Any fry topper, or did you just go raw with those?
What fry?
Any ketchup? Anything on the fries, or did you just kind of
just some ketchup. It's some.
Was
they're
it
good
fancy
fries, so.
ketchup? Was it fancy ketchup?
It was fancy ketchup. In fact,
okay, all right.
I don't know what the hell makes fancy ketchup. People said it comes in a bottle, but I proved them wrong by showing them the fancy ketchup packets.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Well, it's like mayonnaise versus aioli. It's the same thing, just there's extra crap in it.
Right.
well,
But let's not get into tapas, okay?
this is a
Oh,
tech
yeah.
podcast. If you're new to this,
Oh.
believe
No,
it or not.
but Jim, it's a semi-personality driven tech podcast.
Well,
so-
that's true. That's true.
And a variety show.
Smorgasbord of flavors.
Yes.
All
Yeah.
rolled into like a ho-ho.
A veritable cornucopia of opinions and thoughts.
Wait, does that make Jim the cream filling since he's in the middle?
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sure.
I am 78% cream filled.
Okay.
This is why people tune in. This is the
Yes.
reason.
Well,
Hey, and
If you-
a great reason to tune into the video version is so that you can see Jim's location this week, which
yes, I'm in a new
yeah, I
location. some
Spatula
have
City.
noticed. I'm good personal friends with NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang, so I let myself into his kitchen. And so this is where I am now. It's just one of several kitchens in this house, so don't worry. He and his family can still cook and eat while we're recording. But thank you very much for the invite and letting us film here. So
do they
it's
even
great.
know that you're there? I know you have a standing invite, but I mean, he has so many kitchens. They might have even been on that floor of the house today. So
That's true. I talked to the butler. He let me in. So
okay,
at least
Yeah,
somebody
they've
knows.
they've got people for that sort of thing. So
Yes.
I would hope
Exactly.
so.
Well, anyway, we record these shows live, and if you'd like to join us live, you get a little bit of a pre-show where we're kind of bantering, and then we always usually have a post-show where we answer some chat questions and things like that. You can head over to pcpro.com/subscribe, and that will let you know when we go live. We normally record them on a Wednesday or a Thursday night, mostly Thursdays in these days, but it's at 10 p.m. Eastern, regardless of day. 10 p.m. Eastern, that works out to 2 a.m. Thursday morning UTC. And if you sign up for this email, it will let you know about an hour or so before we go live, so you never miss a live show. And of course, if you do miss the show, you want to watch it on demand, head over to pcpro.com/podcasts. So we have a list of all of the published, edited podcasts with the sidebar and all that stuff. And there you can get the show notes. We have links to the stories we covered, links to the picks of the week, the embedded video player up top, and embedded audio player there, as well as links to the RSS feeds and the direct download. And of course, also a link to our Discord. We have a Discord community. You'll find that invite link there at the podcast show notes page. And head over there. We've got a great community going there, and usually gets pretty active during the live recordings as well. So pretty fun over there. And then finally, of course, if you'd like to support what we do here, you can head over to patreon.com/pcper. Every penny you spend there goes directly to operating the site, so we really appreciate it. And of course, we have our little, I don't know what you call it, our deal, where if you become a new patron or increase your pledge, send us a message or change your name before you make the pledge, and I'll get a notification here, and I'll read out whatever you put in there. Yeah, so let's jump into the meat of the show this week. It's finally happened. Intel's 10th gen desktop core processors are here. And Sebastian got the review. He got two of the processors, the i9-10900K, which is the top of the line, and the i5-10600K. So a good mix there between top of the line and more mid-range in that lineup. I know some other sites got the 10700 and a couple lower end ones. There's some reviews floating out there, but it's interesting. The feedback, there's been some surprises as we'll go into with this product. There's been a lot of stuff that isn't a surprise. There was a feeling that I got from people reacting to the reviews, like on places like Reddit and Twitter, where they were, there was a sense of shock or disappointment where it was like, again, Intel, the same crap again. And yeah, of course it is. We've known for a year now that these were going to be another Skylake derivative. It's kind of where Intel's stuck on their manufacturing process, and they're doing the best they can with what they have, and they have made some improvements, like I said, as we'll talk about. But yeah, this is still the same old. It's an iterative approach to a problem, or as a result of a problem they've had in shrinking that process. But let's just jump into the review here. Sebastian, lead us in a discussion here. What's your impression of these two processors?
Well, as you were just saying, I mean, they're making the most of what they have. Their strategy has shifted. They're not the dominant force in desktop processors anymore. Although, of course, they move the most units and they're in the most pre-built PCs and laptops and everything. But in the enthusiast side of things that we tend to cover, I think most of our readers are enthusiasts. It's been all AMD, and it's been pretty much since the Ryzen launch. And there were still some questions, I think, when Ryzen first launched about the single core performance with Ryzen, and it was a much bigger deficit than it is now between Intel and AMD. Something like 20%, I think, in the 1080p gaming that Intel was very proud of, and that has dwindled significantly down to the point where they're almost at parity. And Intel still has an edge, largely because they have such a clock speed advantage right now. So it's like a double-edged sword. They only have 14 nanometer, and at this point, they're just calling it 14 nanometer class. I know everybody jokes about how many pluses are at the end of it. They dropped the pluses after the first two, I think. And whatever we don't have architectural information about it is another point about this review. They have not shared that yet. So if and when they go into a deep dive on 10th gen, we'll have that. But right now we just have the parts. And as you said, we got a Core i9 and a Core i5. I think that's what most people got, the same 10th gen review kit that had 2 processors inside. But at least one other outlet. I know a non-tech got a i7 as well. I've not tested one of those. But what we're looking at is Skylake again. It's another refresh. It's called Comet Lake this time. Comet Lake S on desktop, and they've increased core counts and thread counts. The big thing is at the top end, there's now a 10 core part, whereas last year the high end was the i9-10900K at 8 cores, 16 threads. Now we're at 10 cores, 20 threads. And in addition to this, all of the processors from the i3 up are now hyper-threaded. So there's significant improvement in core counts and thread counts across the board, and they did not raise pricing. So the 1,000 unit price that was announced for example, the i9-10900K is identical to the announced pricing of the 9900K. And of course, we'll see how these settle at retail. I don't know if any of you guys have seen one of these for sale anywhere, though, at all. I cannot find a listing on Amazon, and the listing for the i9 on Newegg was pulled yesterday. So
And
Just
the
that eBay
9900K is a stupid price right now as well. Like, even it's hard to find, let alone the 10900.
Micro Center had some here in Cincinnati, in the Sharonville store. They had a few. I saw some people tweeting. I don't know how many, but $529.
Okay, so as it should be.
Yeah. Well,
right. They announced it at $488 to $499, and then the actual retail ends up being slightly higher. And $529 was at last report, at least going by Newegg, which generally sells for, the going rate. They don't typically price gouge, but they were at $529 for the 9900K 2 days ago. So this is launching it when it's available for the same price. So you're getting 2 more cores, 4 more threads for the same money, and higher clocks. We'll talk about the clocks, but the only other significant improvement of note with the CPU, other than the thermal velocity boost stuff that we can talk about, is memory speed increase. Though how much of an impact that has is debatable. It only went from 2,666 megahertz to 2,933. And only with the Core i7 and Core i9 parts, I incorrectly assumed it was all of the i-series parts. But of course, Core i5 and Core i3 were left behind at 2,666 to help with product segmentation, which will make more sense when you look at charts and see how close in performance the 10600K can be at 6 cores, 12 threads. But it's the big story, though, isn't just about clocks. It's going to be about power draw. It's going to be about thermals as it relates to power draw. And then, of course, it's a new socket. So this is not just a CPU launch. It's a platform launch. Obviously, platform talk has been in the tech news for the last few days for another, reason. But do you guys think it's a big deal that without an architecture change or a process node change, that Intel is requiring you to purchase a new platform for 10th gen?
Well, whether it's a big deal in the sense that AMD has been relatively liberal in that sense, but this is par for the course for Intel. That's how it goes.
Every 1 or 2 years, you've got to buy a new motherboard. They are moving up to LGA 1200 now from 1151. So there are more pins, and the thought is that there's, the need for additional power delivery, and the old platforms were not necessarily up to spec. So regardless of the reason, they're getting you on a Z490 board if you're an early adopter of this. H470.
Well, plus they kind of cure things in that, they're sowing the market with motherboards that will support PCIe 4.0 when it comes out eventually with the next generation. Whiskey Lake? I can't remember. Too many. I complain about that
Rocket.
all the time.
No, Rocket Lake.
Seton Lake? No, Rocket Lake.
Whiskey Lake was
Rocket
their
Lake and
8th gen mobile platform.
Oh, man. I can't remember.
But I mean,
They
because
gotta
we
make
know
things
these
more memorable. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Oh God, don't make it more memorable. I like forgetting the lakes after a couple of years. or the bridges or the coves or God knows what else. No, I was just going to say it's because of the mystery of the extra pins and the PCIe 4.0 support, which doesn't exist on the chip. The LGA 1200, you're pretty much guaranteed at least another generation, if not two, which, knock on wood too, because Intel hasn't done that in dog's age. And that would be nice to see. So at least you're not stuck on what, I've seen it described as a dead end platform. And to be honest, it is. Right? The current LGA platforms that Intel is selling, you're not going to see a new chip for it ever again. You're going to have to accept that as someone who purchases Intel and bite the bullet, jump with a new chip, jump with a new motherboard, and some of the new features that you're going to get eventually.
Can I talk about quickly the elephant in the room when it comes to PCIe 4.0 and Intel? How many lanes come off of an Intel chip? 4 for the chipset, and then 16
There's
for
20
graphics,
total, yeah.
right?
Mhm.
DMI
20
3
total.
and those, yeah. So how are they going to do M.2 4.0?
I know. Without some sort of external chip.
Unless the PCH supports it secretly. But
well, that would be interesting.
Theoretically possible?
And I've seen some active cooling on the Z490s so far. So it's not just an X570
there
thing
is
anymore.
Yeah.
Yep.
A lot of the negatives on the reviews I read on the motherboards today were, bloody loud active cooling.
What was that ASRock one that had the PCIe 4 clock gen thing?
Yeah.
They've got a whole page or a section of their page for the Tai Chi devoted to PCI Express 4.0 and how it's ready for it, has an external clock generator ready for it. They have they've put in higher speed switching between the PCIe lanes. They've gone with reinforced. They said they've literally followed every step that they need to be compliant with PCIe 4.0. Though, of course, Intel did not release 4.0 with this launch. So it's like they were ready. Intel perhaps held that feature back until the next, like the 11th gen. But it seems like if you buy a high-end board now, you'll be ready for PCIe 4 later. But
they've implied the 1200 socket is actually going to be 11th gen capable. I wonder how many of the additional 49 pins were actually for power delivery, and they may have reserved some additional to address the data pin deficiency or the lane deficiency for PCIe.
That's what I wonder.
Always my thought.
Yeah,
that would make more sense to me.
That's one of the differences with high-end desktop. You've got more pins, but there's more platform lanes, more CPU lanes, so more memory channels too. But
once we're power
some link at the motherboard guys. They've got to throw that crap up there so we can see what the hell's going on, because it's not fair to the people who are investing in this platform. And this is kind of funny because it'll probably segue into another thing about not being fair to people and promising things.
Stop.
But sometimes
why don't you tweet
marketing
that? Tweet it.
Engineering. Yeah, I know I should. But sometimes marketing and engineering really need to have a heart-to-heart discussion. And Intel needs to come out and say, okay, this board, the chipset will do PCIe 4.0, but you've got to have a CPU that'll do it. But we are promising 11th gen, it's going to work, and the whole thing is suddenly automatically going to turn into, you've got all these extra lanes coming from the chipset that are all PCIe 4.0, and you can run your M.2 4.0 stuff. But
just install this beta GSID update.
Yeah, no, and what that does is it kind of hurts, unlike AMD where it hurt them that they overpromised, Intel is way, way, way underpromising in terms of what their hardware can do. At least it seems to me that they're kind of sandbagging a bit. And that's not great because people have been thinking, on the horizon, there's going to be some fast 4.0 storage coming out from Samsung and other guys, and it's going to be better than the Phison stuff that's out now. And I'd really like to get into it because, maybe I've got games, maybe I've got, some video stuff, maybe I've got it acting as a scratch drive or whatever the hell they call it for that Adobe crap that everybody uses except me. And these are all things that the extra bandwidth to a large storage pool would be positive for. But it drives me a little insane that Intel's they're not giving very much color on the capabilities of their platform. And so, yeah, it's like the anti-AMD right now, with under-promising and not even promising anything, and just saying, here's this platform. It'll do PCIe 4.0 in the future, but we're not going to give you any real idea of the capabilities once the chips drop, because all we know is that they've got kind of 20 usable lanes. 4 go to the chipset with their DMI3, which is, anyway, yeah, it just, let's see what they say. 1x16, 2x8, 1x8, or 2x4. So in theory, they can do, a PEG slot, as it's only going to be by 8, 4, which is more than enough for any modern GPU. And they could, they could swap off and do 2 M.2 that'll be 4 lanes apiece. So they could do it, but I don't know. It's going to be some interesting motherboard routing and switching, depending on how you install stuff. And that's going to be a pain in the ass. So yeah, Intel's not, I don't know. Go ahead, Sebastian.
I think Gen 4 PCIe takes care of Intel's PCIe lane problem, at least short term, because, for example, we believe that the next generation of NVIDIA graphics cards will be on PCIe 4, and AMD's already are. So while people, typically will never see a benefit of going above 8 lanes at Gen 3 on current generation graphics cards, you certainly won't have any problem with 8 lanes of Gen 4, since it's double the bandwidth. So, you move an Intel platform today onto PCIe Gen 4 and all the devices support it, you're using half as many lanes for the same bandwidth, so then you've effectively doubled your lanes, at least that's how I think of it. So you could have by 2 Gen 4 SSDs with exactly the same throughput as a Gen 3 by 4, for example.
Yeah, but again, the onus kind of falls on the motherboard guys, because they're still going to be enthusiasts who want to have 2 by 16 slots. I mean, they're obviously not electrically by 16 if you've got 2 cards plugged in, even though SLI Crossfire is kind of dead. Some people refuse to consider that. And then, yeah, I mean, if you've got 2 graphics cards in there, you're not going to have off the CPU a Gen 4 by 4 connection to M.2. It's going to go through the chipset. And I mean, you're going to add a little latency to there, if, in fact, the chipset supports 4.0. But they don't tell us these things. And so everybody's kind of left all muddled. And so what are your choices? I'm going to make a bet and buy an Intel part, or I'm going to save a couple of $100 and buy an AMD, which I know supports this technology right off the bat.
Yeah, well, I think Intel, they don't tell us partly because they're not sure yet. I mean, Gen 9 and Gen 10 have had the feeling of being cobbled together out of the circumstances that they have. Nothing that has happened in the last 3 years has been according to plan. It's all been,
a fear response.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're doing what they can. And this goes,
screw the vault, start running.
Right.
They weren't supposed to be this good. The Reds were never supposed to be this good.
That's right.
The greens.
Hey, there's the greens too.
AMD CPU is always green.
Yeah.
Reds are crap.
All right, fair enough.
The Reds. Yeah.
Well, I'll direct you to
lovers.
There's the AMD Press branding kit. I'll let you argue with them on that. But
probably says red team on the outside of the box.
It did at one point. Or the marketing
probably
materials
quickly cover just some basic high level specs, at least with the 2 CPUs that we reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
Which clock speed would you refer to?
Well, you didn't want to talk another half hour on me?
No,
on
no.
the
well, we have so much more to talk about.
PCIe lanes.
We could talk about.
Repent.
Okay, first of all, the new boost. But again, we don't have details.
Which one?
We're told.
Yeah, which boost?
Well, there's two new boosts. So the regular Turbo Boost, which was 2.0 in the last generation, is now called Turbo Boost 3.0. I'm not sure exactly how this differs, if it's a different number of cores. It's 2 boosting cores, but I don't know if the boost behavior changed. One of the interesting things about these new 10th gen processors is that they have per core hyperthreading control. So your motherboard, you'll be able to disable hyperthreading on a per core basis, which sounds a little odd, but when it's explained to you that, well, you have 2 performance cores on every chip that are higher performance than the others, that, and this using this new opportunistic boosting algorithm. So if you identify, for example, on mine, it was core 8 and 9 for the i9. So I don't know if it's always core 8 and 9, but for whatever reason it was, and those were the 2 that were constantly hitting those high boost spikes. You can disable hyperthreading on your performance cores to theoretically lower latency and then have slightly improved single threaded performance, apparently. And because you have these extra cores to play with, it doesn't hurt you as much to have, for example, it would be 8 cores with hyperthreading, so 16 threads there, but then 2 single core, slightly higher clock, single threaded cores. So it's just the nuance there is interesting. I haven't gotten into any overclocking or anything with these yet. And power is going to be a limiting factor unless you're on a board that can support overclocking one of these, because power went up 30 watts from the i9 last year, 95 watts. And I know the TDP is basically a joke. At this point, there's no way a 9900K is only 95 watts. It was always a little bit above that, but the TDP is based on the base frequency on all cores. So because these can boost, if you have thermal headroom, you're going to exceed the TDP. And the TDP on these new chips is 125 watts. The reviews out there, our review, I'm just showing the old fashioned, I have a power meter in between the wall and the test bench. So you have to factor it's a gold rated 1000 watt power supply. So only 90 some percent is even getting to the system. And then beyond that, there's the overhead of the motherboard and the memory and the graphics card, even though it's at idle, and everything else. Even the power from the CPU cooler and the fans, which all adds to this. But power draw was still very high with the Core i9, for example.
Well, that's because you plugged in your coffee warmer into the USB while testing this.
It's only,
You have one of those.
I think it's only a 5 watt warmer. So it didn't.
I thought you were using one of those little fan things, the little, the little USB.
We're not going to talk about other USB applications that could be pulling a lot of watts because this is.
It wasn't a fan, is what you're saying.
Hey,
I understand. No, forget it.
Look, it got
That
so
old
hot.
humping dog USB drive.
I had to use the USB powered personal fan as well, but not really. So the boost clocks,
it'll hop across your desk. Little
the motherboard melted, but I had
control has left the building.
So base clocks on this up slightly from the Core i9 last year. It goes to 3.7 from 3.6, and boost clocks go to 5.2 gigahertz from 5.0 gigahertz. But the big thing is this TVB, thermal velocity boost, which is a new concept, I think, for people. I believe it was in the mobile parts that have already been released. I want to say that it originated with, am I wrong, Jim? Weren't they in 10th gen? Was TVB in 10th gen mobile? I forget.
It was in HETT. I know that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't
That's
think
what I'm
so.
thinking of.
Yeah,
okay.
HETT.
So thermal velocity boost, quoting Intel here, is a feature that opportunistically and automatically increases clock frequency above single and multi-core Intel Turbo Boost technology frequencies based on how much the processor is operating below its maximum temperature, etc. So there's an algorithm. If you have sufficient cooling and power available, it will boost up to 5.3 gigahertz single core on 2 cores and up to 4.9 gigahertz all core. So that is significant. It's a big improvement over last year as far as just raw clock speeds. And this is what they have to do. They're increasing the core counts. They're increasing the clock speeds so that they can maintain a competitive level with what AMD offers. And they're doing it for the same price as last year. So those are the good things. Now we actually have to look at performance to know exactly how these stack up with AMD parts, because I did a lot of comparing Intel to Intel. I realized as I was writing this review and doing all the testing, and really this is the big picture is AMD versus Intel. So I had to bring myself back down, and and don't worry, we ran Cinebench, so that matters. So if you look at performance numbers, I did some just basic compute stuff just to try to show single and multi-threaded performance. And so it's nothing special. I'm not using the level of advanced applications that non-tech has moved to. For example, it's sort of the plebeian stage, I guess, but Blender, the latest version of Blender, 3900X. And by the way, I did not test the 3950X over again. These are all new benchmarks. I spent the last 2 or 3 weeks doing nothing but benchmarking CPUs on the latest motherboard firmware and drivers and all of that. But I'm trying to keep this to like $500-ish and below for the processors, because obviously Ryzen 9 3960X, you get into that $750 range, and then, well, you might as well move up to the 10980XE and put those in there too at $1,000 if you could buy one. But I kept it to 500 or less. And the 3900X is, of course, faster in multi-threaded applications because it has a 2-core, 4-thread advantage and some very good boost clocks as well. So Blender, a little bit faster with the Ryzen 9. Cinebench, interesting to see Intel take the lead again. I saw other outlets like Digital Foundry, for example. I think they recorded a score of 543 or something with Cinebench single core with the new i9-10900K. I average across multiple runs, so I did get some. I think I got one that was like 541, but it ended up averaging out to 536. Still higher than the 3900X, which was already a very high 529 in that test, if you care about Cinebench single core test scores. But of course, Ryzen 9 wins Cinebench as well. 7106 versus 6379 with the i9. These are like 1 and 2 on the charts until we moved to Geekbench. And Geekbench is a different set of tests. It's doing, for example, hardware, AES encryption type work, as well as integer and floating point. So the overall score with the i9 was significantly higher single core. And again, some of that is probably the boost clock, because this was definitely boosting up to that theoretical maximum when I did some frequency testing. So 1444, very high Geekbench 5 single core score. Second place was the i9-9900K from last year at 1354, and then right behind that was the Ryzen 9 at 1341. So a big single core lead, but when you move to multi-thread, even though it was in third place with single-threaded performance, those extra cores add up, and Ryzen 9 was still number 1 in Geekbench, and not by a small number. It was like 800 points higher than the Core i9. So if you have an application that's well optimized and can take advantage of all available cores and threads, AMD is still the platform of choice. If that's your priority, if productivity and multi-threaded applications are your priority, then Intel did not take the lead back. We'll get into gaming next, but just a few other tests if you want to look at the site. It's pretty much the same story. For example, the X264 HD benchmark, and I know people don't like this. It's a 2-pass benchmark, but it's still fully multi-threaded, and it's a high-quality 1080p file being encoded, and it scales perfectly with cores and threads. As you can see, the first pass is very easy. It's not taxing at all on the CPU, and Intel dominates there. But on the second pass, AMD takes over because it has, again, the core and thread advantage. So we had about 30 seconds faster on this job with the Ryzen 9 versus the Core i9. So I did some clock speed testing, and very briefly. And I need to go back and do some longer tests, because not thinking, oh, Cinebench, that's fine, because I'm using Cinebench for just a quick test of the load, like the power draw, with all of these processors. And for a lot of the processors I was testing, because I started with a Core i3 and worked my way up, it's a longer test. It's a couple minutes or more for a multi-core test on some of the lower end processors. But with these high-end processors, it's not even a minute long. And there's by default, there's a 56-second duration with standard power limits. So, of course, Cinebench only taking about 40 seconds. This is going to perform as high as possible. So we're getting the highest clock speeds we're going to see. It's not realistic over a much longer load. Like I need to do like a Blender classroom test or something, which lasts about 6 to 8 minutes with a high-end CPU. But for what it's worth, on single core loads, I absolutely saw spikes up to 5.3 gigahertz. This particular test, I saw 8 spikes. It's opportunistically moving up whenever it sees it has the ability to do so. And then for the most part, it was at 5.1 gigahertz, and it would only drop down to 4.9 gigahertz all core when I moved over to the Cinebench all core test. Again, short test, but we had those initial spikes as it was loading up the test. It went up to 5.3 gigahertz single core. And then as it began the all core run, it shifted down to 4.9 consistently. And then we had that spike back up to 5.3 at the end as it was presenting the results. So the boost behavior, at least theoretically, is as advertised. You will see different results based on whatever your power limit settings are and whatever kind of thermal headroom you have. And I made it clear in the review that I was using a high performance cooler. I went into this having heard some rumors about how badly this was going to perform with thermals. I was pleasantly surprised because even during Cinebench all-core runs, I was at a maximum of 63C, and that was in a 22C room. So not bad at all. Lower than the last generation, in fact. So if you're respecting the power duration limits, the default boost behavior, if you don't have a multi-core enhancement, for example, enabled on your motherboard, which our motherboard had enabled by default, I always have to go in and disable that, then you're not going to see bad thermals at all with these K-series parts. And I do cover thermals later in the review, but quickly, if we're at that point, just some gaming.
Can I just add one small thing?
Yeah. Yes.
Excuse me. I'm still impressed that they're able to do all core 4.9. That's impressive for an extended period of time. I mean, AMD, they have their boost clock at the highest end is 4.6 and base at 4. And when you start running those processors, you may see them jump up to 4.5 gigahertz on all core, but then they just, slowly keep backing down and go at about, 4.2, 4.1, depending on, environmental conditions. But sustained 4.9 there's some good engineering in there to get it to that point. I mean, there are a lot of trade-offs in the 14 nanometer plus whatever this one is. I can't remember like anything anymore. But did they ever give die sizes on these?
No. So waiting.
That's going to be interesting because, yeah, I mean, like the i7-7700K was like 110, if I'm remembering correctly. That's a 4-core, 8-thread. So yeah, they've got to start getting these up there because the regular 14 nanometer is still a more dense product than the 14 plus, 14 plus plus, 14 plus plus plus. Because to achieve higher level performance and efficiency, they've had to do things at a very low level, and they've had to increase the size of some of the features to get better power efficiency, better switching speed, all that stuff. And so, yeah, it would be pretty interesting to hear what die sizes have gone to. And as die sizes expand and they add more transistors, they're still able to keep power mostly under control. And of course, you're going to talk about that soon.
Yes. We don't have to spend much time on gaming because I did gaming testing the way that pretty much have to do CPU reviews to show CPU scaling. So lower settings, 1080p, higher in graphics card, in this case just an RTX 2080, but it's still a Far Cry 5, for example, slightly older game engine, scales very well, single-threaded, and you have Intel occupying the top 6 spots with the i9-10900K on top and the 9900K about 10 frames per second behind. So a nice boost, same graphics card, same drivers, everything. Move up to this new CPU and you find out, even my 9900K was a bottleneck because I'm getting 10 more FPS out of the same graphics card. So that's significant. And that's another thing actually to take note if you're looking at these charts. The Core i5 that we received, the 10600K, this is a heck of a gaming CPU for an announced price of $262 to $263. I have not seen it listed anywhere for sale. I'm guessing it's going to be in the $269 to $279 range. It's essentially at the same performance level of the i7-9700K. It's within like a frame per second of it in gaming tests. And I've seen this corroborated to other outlets. The 10600K kind of steals the show here because it's half the cost, but nearly the same level of performance in games. And that's from a 6-core 12-thread part, which, on paper, it looks like it might be closer to the performance of the older i7-8700K, the Coffee Lake part, which shares its core and thread count, but higher clock speeds, much higher base clock. It's a much better performer. And of course, lower TDP. That's no, it's not a lower TDP. I correct myself.
No.
It's 125 watts. You'd think it would be 95, but both the Core i5 and the Core i9 are listed at 125 watts. But it was the same story with Metro Exodus, more demanding games, not quite the level of scaling we saw, but still Intel in the top 6 spots, still the 10900K on top, and this time the 10600K in second place, above a couple of other CPUs, including that 9900K. And then when we get to Dota 2, my lone so-called like competitive gaming tests, much bigger lead for the 10900K. This game obviously scales very well across multiple threads as well as with higher clock speeds, and 306 frames per second in a very challenging team fight match, by the way. Like the match that I use as the demo, following a guide that I link to create a consistent benchmark with a script. It's intense. It's like there's all sorts of stuff going on the screen. And with a lower end CPU and the same graphics card, like with the Ryzen 3 3100, which is at the bottom of this list, with the RTX 2080, it was 180 frames per second. And with the 10900K at the top of the list, it was 306.5 frames per second. So you definitely will see a benefit if you are specifically looking for the highest FPS you can get. Like if you have a 240 hertz monitor, or if you're a competitive gamer who values just FPS, which is, I think, what Intel is targeting when they say that they're the fastest processor for gaming, because all their internal testing is showing things like Dota and CSGO. So if that's what you're after, Intel dominates the gaming charts yet again. So that's one thing to consider about these versus AMD, where AMD across the board wins on compute. But power consumption was like if you're going to do performance per watt, these are not going to win. So again, I'm going to caution you, this is total system power. And I think it would be wise to, if you're interested in a better look at the true power draw from just the CPU, check out the Gamers Nexus review, because Steve did EPS 12 volts power measurements. I don't know if they're using a meter or some sort of device they've come up with that's like that goes between like the power supply and the CPU. But the way that he's measuring it, and I don't know how much the CPU might be getting off of just the regular 24 pin. If anything, I would have to read up on the spec, but he was showing only about
he measured it off the EPS 8-pin. He said EPS rail.
Yeah, so just that rail. So it was 125 off of that rail. So as advertised. But the way I measure things, the old-fashioned way, it was 278 watts. And I mean, the GPU was pulling less than 10, because I use a low power GPU for these power consumption tests. So I switched from the RTX 2080 to a GTX 1650 with a 0 RPM idle fan. It's drawing like, I don't know, less than 5 watts total, maybe less than 4. And then, memory wasn't even all that high, because I only used the stock memory settings for each CPU. So for this, it was a 2933 at 1.35 volts. So, and a regular SATA SSD, nothing fancy. So,
and the USB choice unplugged.
Watts. Well, yeah, but it's a myriad.
I mean, the thing you really got to get from that is comparing your orange to orange, the 9700 versus this. I mean, that's a significant jump in power consumption when you have an identical system under an identical load, or 9900K. Sorry, not the 9700. 9700 is even crazier. That's 110 watts at the wall. That's This reminds me very much back in the day of when I was testing a FX 8350 and then I swapped out the CPU to a FX 9590 or 9570. I can't remember. 9570, I think. And that was the exact same. I mean, it was a tremendous jump at the wall from one to the other. And the performance was, at the time that FX 9000 series was about at a 3770K, Intel i7 3770K performance. But yeah, that's still plenty of power that your system is feeling when you plug that thing in and really get it going.
And wouldn't you think overclocking, which becomes crazy.
Yeah, even Steve's numbers off of that EPS rail, they are really high when he overclocked the system. So just it was over 300 watts, I think. Anyway, you'd think with all that power, there'd be a huge thermal problem. But it's almost like Intel anticipated this because the enthusiast parts, the K-series parts only, have a new design. Their actual integrated heat spreader is thicker. They have shaved down the die itself. So between that and this thin die, they call it STIM, the thin die solder thermal interface material. So it's soldered, thick IHS. It absolutely does help with heat dissipation. It's tremendously improved versus the last generation. So this is where the engineering comes in, where it's funny because I have a feeling, having watched the Linus video yesterday, where the video called Why I Still Love Intel, he was talking about engineering just in general terms and how people within the company care quite a bit, and why like the sins of a corporation are different if you actually look within the company at the people who design things and who are proud of what they've done. But this, I'm guessing, is what he was referring to, because people are kind of blown away by loads in the low to mid 60s, sustained loads with high core clocks. And it's almost like they've done the work for you. The delitting process that some people go through to get better thermals and higher overclocking headroom with like 7th, 8th, and 9th generation parts, you really don't have to do that with these, because it's such a good implementation of a heat spreader. And I don't know, I would need more data to analyze the thermals better and to do some longer sustained loads. And I'd love to see if just a mid-sized air cooler can handle these, because I was throwing 280 millimeters of a very high performance liquid cooler with the fans at 100% moving 97, what is it, CFM, and just like the pump was at like 5,000 RPM, and it was unnecessary. The whole thing was far cooler than expected with the Core i5 and the Core i9. So the T junction on these is 100C.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Oh, I was just going to say, there were a few people who actually were taking 9900Ks and melting the solder off of them and getting it slightly improved cooling performance. And there was a lot of talk about how, even though that they had soldered that particular CPU, that they didn't quite get it right, for thermal dissipation and all that. So is it the increased thermal mass? Is it the reduced size of the die? And I mean, you can go back and look at videos. I think there's even like a Derbaro one where he went and sanded the die in a 9900K and got some improved thermal performance out of it with liquid metal after that. But this is the first one that I've seen that I would say that sane people should not be tempted to melt the solder off of this one. I think they probably got this one's mashed together about as well as it's going to get. That's what my sense of that.
Well, Sebastian, you mentioned, both of you mentioned like the extreme measures that some people go to, and delitting and stuff. And I've never really delitted, at least not in 10 years.
On purpose?
No,
yeah, we're not all Jordan,
right. Well,
Jordan from our Discord, he delids everything, but
and I believe I think Scott Michaud on our staff, I believe he's had some experience with that as well, and Maury maybe.
Maury
did. I think Maury actually cracked a die once.
He
really
did crack some dies.
Yeah.
But
For one.
It's fun times.
the point is, my understanding of that practice, it does improve things, but this improvement, this seeming improvement, is significantly greater than what you can expect to receive from a standard delitting, like on a dealing
Yeah.
at 900K. The delta is much greater. So, whether it's this this new way of adding the IHS and putting it all together, or whether it's additional improvements and power limits, it's
Can I ask one housekeeping
better.
question on that diagram?
okay.
Did we really learn about that on April 30th? Did we actually post news on that?
Yeah, we
I
posted
posted
it
it.
prior to launch. Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
reusing
wow.
the same image
Yeah.
that I posted on the 30th.
Wow, where have I been?
You've
Well,
been busy.
that-
The world,
Working.
there other things are going on. It's fine.
It's a new
That-
burger joint that opens every day.
Well, I was thinking that might have
Yeah,
been when you
somewhere.
spilled on your keyboard and had to leave. For a few
Oh.
minutes. That might have been that. That was the
Oh, I
time
think you're
frame.
right. You're
Yep.
right. Wasn't paying attention to much, but my
Yep.
keyboard
And it was
survived.
Patch Thursday. Patch Thursday.
Yeah.
That kept you busy.
Everything goes downhill for me.
We
Okay.
could probably distill all of the improvements with these down to just the maturity of this 14 nanometer process. Like a fine wine,
Mhm.
Intel's 14 nanometer has reached this point where it is exquisite. It's really something to behold. That could be where these improvements are coming
eating
from
all
in
the
thermals.
Well, I
Is
mean,
it to the point?
Oh, go ahead.
Is it to the point where you almost wished that certain companies wouldn't give up on a process too soon? That they may no, try harder. You can do it. There's more here.
Like 28 nanometer HKMG. Yeah.
Right.
Stay with it.
The high K metal gates.
Stay with it. You can do it.
Playing it for life.
There's more in it.
Right. Well, I mean, so obviously you're partially being facetious there, but there is something to be said with because they've been forced to stick here. They are so refined, and if you can contrast that with their 10 nanometer launch with Ice Lake, when we were at the Intel campus for the Ice Lake briefing, and they came out, and the first real slide of information they showed us was that it was going to be an 18% IPC increase, which is huge. I mean, AMD's proven that to be not so important, or not so, they've exceeded that as well on their own end. But at the time, it was like 18% gen over gen IPC increase. And then I was sitting after we took a break. We were in the Intel cafeteria, and I was talking to, I think it was Paul Alcorn from Tom's and Patrick Kennedy from Serve the Home, and another member of our group, who I don't want to name because he had been tipping us on some stuff ahead of time. We were sitting there going 18%, geez. And he said, yeah, well, wait till you see the clocks. And as we know, Ice Lake launched with really poor clocks. And that's
I think that he may have been semi-accurate about that too.
Well, he was. I mean, and so that's the danger. You've got this really well-refined process that they've been stuck on, but that they're really good at, versus jumping into 10 nanometer and having all those difficulties and not being able to get the clocks to where they needed to be. So it is a trade-off there, and knowing how Intel went bad with their plans many years ago, would you rather them have tried to push a new architecture that wasn't great, that had poor clocks and other issues, versus this? And so I don't know. I don't know what the answer is there.
There's no way they could have done it. They could have done that in another era. They could have done that before Zen.
That's true. Yeah.
When they were just doing these little iterative things. They could have, because at one point, remember, Intel had hadn't abandoned desktop, but they were definitely, from the Haswell era on, we're talking about this sort of mobile first approach. Remember, there was a time when Intel was trying to get into phones, when Haswell had brought the voltage regulation on board, and everything seemed to be going to this more unified, like self-contained, if that's the right term, approach, where it was like an SoC, and it was getting smaller and smaller and more capable, but it was more about efficiency than it was about just raw power. And we had seen just this stagnation where they hit about 4 gigahertz and never really went any higher. And then Zen happens, and then this is the third year in a row that Intel has refreshed a Skylake derivative with more clocks, with more cores and higher clocks. That's been the answer, because they haven't been able to transition fast enough to a new process node that also gives them the performance numbers they need. They could be on 10 nanometer right now if we're willing to live at it with a 3 gigahertz processor. But we can't, or they can't, because it wouldn't be competitive anymore. So
Interesting.
That's just my feeling on this, because I mean, you have Ryzen, the clocks aren't quite as high, but you still have 3.6, 4.0, all the way up to actually 4.7, which you can occasionally get on a 3950X, depending on the load and what your cooling situation is. But sustained clocks on these are very good. They're far better than the competition. They're almost a gigahertz faster. When I was doing a lot of folding with all the equipment here before I started shifting over to just retesting all the CPUs and put the test benches back into service for that, underwater with this Hydro X cooled system back here, a 3950X would be somewhere between 3.9 and 4 gigahertz all cores under that sustained folding load when it had a job. So if you look at sustained performance, if you have the power for it, if you have the thermal headroom for it, you can be almost a gigahertz faster than that on Intel. So their clock speeds are amazing at 14 nanometer, even with the power draw. At some point, you have to enthusiasts. I feel like it's a fun metric to point to mock Intel about because of their power draw. And I'm not an Intel apologist. I'm just saying, it draws more power, and it's more expensive per core, but it has the fastest clocks. It's actually got the highest clock speed and thus has the highest single core performance. Whether it has the highest IPC or not, that would be a matter of like clocking them identically and running a bunch of controlled tests to determine that. Intel typically has had the lead in IPC, but they definitely have the lead in clock speeds. They have the lead in gaming still, unless you're gaming at 1440 or above, where you put the majority of the bottleneck on the GPU, and the CPU doesn't really matter as much as long as it's powerful enough. But at some point, I did want to mention motherboard pricing, though, because this Z490 launch is interesting because we have motherboards that are averaging high-end desktop pricing. It looks like X299 pricing for a lot of these, where they top out at if we take out the very high-end liquid cool ready, like ASRock and Gigabyte boards that are $1,100 and $1,300, then we're looking at boards that go all the way up to $800. The board I tested, I didn't even know this when I was running the benchmarks. I have a ROG Maximus 12 Extreme. That's a $750 motherboard. The median seems to be $299. That's kind of your entry level for a high-end board. There are boards available all the way down to $149. I do not know all the numbers on those, like what kind of power delivery they have, if they could even support a Core i9 or not. But what did I say in the review? Of the 45 available boards on Newegg, 16 were priced at $300 or above. And then on the low end, 18 of 45 were $200 or less. All the rest of them are right in that $200 to $300 range, kind of skewing towards $300. So it's not an insignificant investment if you're getting onto this platform. It feels to me like a high-end desktop with a cheaper CPU, kind of like when in the Ivy Bridge E era was the 3820 Ivy Bridge. There was.
I don't know. You can kind of compare it to the X570 when it was released,
or compare it to the 10900X. Oh, I just said a dirty word.
Oh Lord, yeah.
No.
It's like throwing a stick bomb in the room.
Everybody was shocked to see a $600 to $700 AMD board. Why?
Yeah.
Well, apparently that was where the industry was heading. I don't understand it. I mean, I remember being shell-shocked back in the 6800 Ultra days where they offered double the amount of memory of the 6800 Ultra, and that was a $1,000 video card. Nobody had a $1,000 video card back then. Even the professional stuff was nowhere near that. And it's just bizarre to me that we are seeing now motherboards where it used to be $300, you had everything but the kitchen sink, and that was the highest end that you got. And then we started creeping above, and then with the X570 boards, that was the first time I really, other than the really high end workstation type boards, and the previously mentioned, really super duper Intel stuff that, 2,000 plus pins, LGA grids, that we saw a desktop board get that high. And it's like, why? I don't understand. And I still am not entirely sure why. I mean, yeah, they've got like Saber DAX on some of the audio stuff, but seriously, $700 for that?
Yep.
Seems pricey.
Yeah.
I need to weigh this Maximus board though. It is so heavy that I think if you're dealing with, like, if you're talking about steak, you don't complain when your steak is $18 a pound if it's the primo stuff and you've got the money to spend.
It's gold. It's gold,
But-
Jerry. Gold.
How many
How much
TR4s
per
does it weigh?
Exactly.
Ooh, yeah.
I need to figure out if this motherboard wins on performance per pound, because it's a heavy board. But yeah, I mean, the total investment here to get to the 10th gen clocks and the higher core count, definitely don't have to do that on the low end. If you're buying a Core i3 just to get a new part with hyper-threading, that sort of thing, you could probably buy one of those $150 boards. But that's what I would be interested to see, because of course we generally get sampled, whether it's AMD or Intel, with a high-end board. For example, I was sent that $600 X570 Godlike board by AMD with the reviewer kit for the Zen 2 processors. So, of course, Intel, they sent a high-end board as well. I have a couple of other boards in, though, which are in the $300 and I think $370 range. Nothing below that yet. So be interested to see, what the picture looks like with especially once H470 comes out, because that'll be a lot more, you would think it'd be a lot more accessible. And then there's going to be a B460, I think is the chipset. So definitely some lower end stuff coming, but for now, that's what the picture looks like. This is launching at the high end, launching with just Z490 so far.
And availability on those, have you seen? I mean, I know
board,
Micro
you could
Center
pre-order
had some
all the
boards.
boards, but like 2 yesterday.
Nah.
I haven't
Yeah.
seen that today.
Yeah.
You can't have one.
Remember
Okay,
the
so-
old paper launch?
Well, yeah, I mean, and I saw there were some comments in our Discord a little bit ago about, why we and others, when Zen 3 or Zen 2 launched, were critical of the supply and availability. And so why isn't Intel getting that here? And well, they are. I mean, I haven't seen many articles personally about it.
At least every other week I make fun of the availability of Intel stuff
Well,
for the last 8
sure.
months or
Yes.
so.
Well, Intel's had supply problems for 2 years now.
Yeah.
In terms of boards and other components that you need for your system, the current economic situation, I'm sure, is having an effect as well. It is pretty much par for the course these days, where when there's an official launch date, it's not going to be just a simple thing of walking into a Micro Center or a Fry's or going on Newegg and being able to get it right away. I mean, a few people will, but we're looking at tight availability for pretty much everything in this industry right now. So, I mean, have you gotten your monitor yet, Jeremy? No?
In 4 days, it will be 3 months since I ordered it.
Wow. Any updates? Is it sitting in Saskatchewan?
I now
or
have
something?
5% off my next purchase of Dell equipment.
Oh, how generous
Oh, and you'll be
of
sure to
them.
make that
They
soon.
apologize. But no, it still says order confirmed.
Mhm.
We apologize for the delay in the shipping.
So
If your item hasn't shipped, please contact this email address to find out why.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Which I do, once a month or so, just to say hi.
So, but that's what we're facing, is limited availability for pretty much everybody, and that does
Yeah.
suck.
Yep.
But
we saw the same thing when Ryzen launched, and we were complaining about the lack of availability of the 3900X for a while, and then of course it took a while for them to kind of meet the demand for the 3950X. Even though that's a $750 part, what you're getting for it is significant. And then that became commonly available, and now both of those sell for under their MSRP. So they caught up, but they have TSMC and a smaller percentage of the market. They have a high percentage, very high percentage of the enthusiast market. But you look at any pre-built PC, and I was actually looking at Dell a couple days ago to see, because they had put the 10th gen up for sale in their Aurora R11, I think is what it is up to, desktop. And I was more looking because of this Asetek GPU sidecar liquid cooler thing, which is, I don't know why, but I find it appealing. But yeah, those were all up for sale. It didn't say pre-order, it was just letting you add it to your cart. And they had all the 10th gen processors. Although I don't think they were selling the 10900K, they were doing the F series part, which is another thing. Like if you actually look at the charts of the announced CPUs, even going back to our news post on this on the April 30th, there are variants. There's like 4 Core i9 parts this time. So it depends on the power, whether or not it's unlocked, whether or not it has graphics on board, whether it's unlocked with no graphics on board. So there's different options out there. A lot of SKUs, obviously, but it didn't seem like there was any immediate availability issue, at least if you're buying a pre-built PC. That might be Intel's focus, is seeding these parts out to like your Dells and the Digital Storms and all of those.
All the SIs. Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be honest, the original Ryzen 2 or Ryzen 3 launch, where it was much easier to buy a system, strip out the CPU and build your own afterwards, because it was literally the only way to get your hands on one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what we encountered when we were trying to get a 3950X. And
I had it in my cart more than once to just buy an Alienware to get it. But
and then we ended up finding availability, thanks to one of our readers. I apologize that I can't recall who sent us there, but the Silicon Lottery web store finally had one, and so we pulled the trigger on that. But yeah, we were, as a site that didn't get sampled, we were desperately trying to find one. And now you can pretty much get them anywhere. But so overall, I guess an interesting, it's not as bad in the thermals as we had anticipated, which is really good news, and Intel should be applauded for that. As a platform, it brings good things like 2.5 gig Ethernet built in, and Wi-Fi 6, and it's got good USB controllers, and it's a stable platform, and it performs very well, even if it uses a lot of power. But the question is, what do you do? Do you upgrade? I saw somebody on Reddit, I believe unironically, asking if they should upgrade from their 9900K to a 10900K.
Yes, you should.
Unless you just are very wealthy and don't have any concerns about spending money. My God, no. Right. Don't. This is
set money on fire.
Yeah, this is a
get
great
that new memory frequency along with that new motherboard and the new chip.
Yeah. So if you're into that, fine. But no, this is an option if you want to stick with Intel. If you're gaming first and you're gaming at those low resolutions, because as we've talked about, at higher resolutions that you're more likely to game at, the CPU advantage goes away for Intel. But if that's your thing, then go for it. But also, I mean, Zen 3 is coming. Latest rumors points to end of September. So if you can wait a little bit, it would be probably worth it. It would allow Intel to get supply into the channel. So when you do want to buy, you'd have something to buy. And it allows us to see what AMD is going to have in store, because they're promising some pretty big IPC improvements as well for Zen 3. So I if you need something right now today and Intel works for you, it's good to see that the prices have stayed relatively competitive thanks to that pressure from AMD. And I don't think we're going to have any problems like we've seen with Aegis stuff on AMD's side. I think this is probably going to be a very solid, mature platform that you can count on.
Yeah.
They've had some experience with it.
Plus, aren't the BIOS sizes on Intel boards typically, at least on the higher end, much larger? I want to say
you had to go there, didn't you?
Yeah.
You mean the BIOS chip storage?
Yeah, like the actual.
Yeah, they're 32s
on the board. There's a 16 megabyte chip on these ROG boards. It's so big they actually have some of the drivers, or at least installers for them, on the motherboard. Believe it or not, if you clean install Windows on one of these and have never connected it to the internet, you will already have a system process running and like asking you to download their software. And I read about this and I was reading like some forum posts and I was like, oh yeah, that's actually right there on the ROM, and it loads into the operating system at boot. And here are the steps you have to take to disable it. And it's really just like one toggle in the BIOS. So if you know about it and don't want the software or the reminder for the software, you actually have to disable it in the UEFI setup before you install Windows, or it will actually, like a virus, go in there and load itself.
I was going to
Yeah,
say
that's never gone poorly for companies before.
No, Thunderbolt, no.
That will
But this is
support
what they can
assist.
do. They have all this extra room. If you're on Intel, it's like, what do I do with this ROM? I guess we could put drivers on there, I guess. But on the AMD side, we don't have enough space for 2 generations of processors, guys. I'm sorry. We're going to have to let one of them go. In fact, we're going to have to let 2 of them go, because the third one takes up more space than the other 2 combined. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here.
Well, no, let's just jump into that story anyway. So as we're talking about, obviously we've mentioned in previous weeks, there's been some controversy here because of B450 support for Zen 3. B450 is last year's mid-range AMD board, but of course AMD has been this, as opposed to Intel, which is very much stuck on a one processor, one platform system. AMD and the AM4 socket has promised broad support, and pretty much you can buy 370, 470, 570 board and run all your processors on any board. But as we saw when they announced B550, they also announced that Zen 3 would not go to B450. So Zen 3 coming
or
out
X470 for that matter.
Right. And that was, a lot of people felt that AMD had lied or misled them. I don't believe they ever said that it would be on this, that this chipset would support this processor, this architecture.
Well, MSI did.
Yeah, some motherboard manufacturers did make statements like that, but in general,
can I draw your attention briefly to the slide that I used as the header image for the news post, which was taken from AMD's press kit for the spring update this year, and it's as AMD socket AM4, a legacy of trust and performance. It talks about the PCIe 4.0 and unlocked longevity from 2016 to 2020 plus.
Well, that's a real legacy of trust, people.
They had been talking about AM4 as this. This was something that was talked to us. They spoke about this at E3 last year when we had our little breakout sessions with the engineering team, and they were talking about how AM4. They were committed to AM4. They were proud of the fact that they had like 4 generations on AM4. But they did kind of like in our actual sessions when we were talking to some of the engineering team, they were like, yeah, there are going to be, going forward, we are eventually going to have to move to another platform because we need to be able to support things like DDR5 and, other features and things that we want to do with the processors. We won't be able to stick with this forever. But for the time being, for this generation and for next generation, we will be on this socket. So then when this news broke that they were essentially dropping support for 400 series boards, it's a very technical issue. It's not like they're making a choice to force people to buy a new chipset board. There are problems with implementing the required AGESA code, something that everybody's going to have to familiarize themselves with. If you don't know what AGESA code is this large chunk of data that has to reside on your motherboard's ROM chip. And if there isn't enough physical space for it with the way that these are sized and with the way that the partitions are, I don't know if honestly if it's just a straight up size limit or if sometimes it's actually a partition size limit. But regardless,
it's both actually.
There's not enough space physically on the chip. And do you think a motherboard manufacturer back when Zen first came out, like a 300 series board or even a 400 series board from a year or two ago, is going to, like, if they were not informed, if AMD didn't say, hey, vendors, you need to spend the extra money on a larger chip, it's going to maybe increase the cost of these boards by a few bucks. But to be forward thinking, Zen 3 is coming in 2020. We need you to be ready. We need you to double the ROM size. That did not happen. I don't think these motherboard vendors honestly knew about it. Just the brief interaction I had with somebody closer to the engineering team from one of these vendors last year, leading up to the Zen 2 launch, I was having an issue with the board, and they were basically kind of off the record, like, there was actually an issue with us getting the proper schematics. Like, we didn't know about this one resistor, and it's just electrically incompatible, and I had to be sent another motherboard. So there's sometimes a communication issue. I don't think these board vendors knew that this was going to be an issue down the road. AMD also, you want to investigate a GISA code, and we've gone from the launch of Zen 2 was on a GISA 1.0.0.2. We're up to 1.0.0.5, and they don't have release notes to accompany these. There are certain things that you can find from a motherboard vendor as far as changes that have been made, enhancements, memory compatibility. They've changed voltages. They've changed boost behavior with this. So there's a tremendous amount that goes into each of these updates, and they're large. So it's not like, Asus and MSI and ASRock and Gigabyte are trying to screw consumers, or that AMD is trying to screw consumers. It was a physical limitation that there's only one way to overcome it, and that's what this post is about. That their reversal post on Reddit, where they talk about how they've decided to once again enable support for Zen 3 on B450 and X470, but it's messy at best. Look at these bullet points for what
you learned
is
it here,
involved.
kids. If you want something, whine on the internet, and it will happen.
On Reddit specifically, actually.
It wasn't just Reddit; it was Twitter
That's true.
and Facebook,
YouTube videos and things of that nature.
Yeah. I'll also say real quick too, because I know we went over a lot of the reasons why it wasn't going to happen on the last show, but all the counterpoints I saw from people who were arguing against AMD's position were, first of all, some motherboard manufacturers, and in fact, I saw some people trying to tally it up. A lot of them could have supported it, and that one suggestion was that some manufacturers didn't want to, and rather than having a what's the word, a divided marketplace and confusion, AMD decided, well, let's just cancel it. If we can't get everybody to be on board, let's just not go through with it. And then and just to mention that one company that was suggested to be Asus was the one who was holding out. But then also, because B550 launched so late, so far after X570, people who were buying those mid-range boards were going with a B450. Now, maybe if you went and bought a 3900X and you put it on a 450 board, you're not likely to upgrade to Zen 3, the Ryzen 4000. But some people might have, and some people would have gone and gotten a 2000 series processor. Because we've said that. We've said, because of all this great support, you can buy a cheap processor now and upgrade later without having to replace anything. So I can understand the reasons behind how people, or the reasons why people were upset about this. But as Sebastian said, yes, this is going to be a messy process. There's going to be it's a one-way path. They've said, this is what they've said. We'll see if that actually happens in practice, but it'll be a one-way upgrade. They're going to verify that you own both the B450 board or X470 board and the Ryzen 4000 Zen 3 processor. So I don't know exactly how they're going to do that yet, but there's going to be some sort of verification there, and they're going to deliver you this new BIOS, the flash, and it's not clear what the process is. Like, will you need a Ryzen 3000 processor in there to flash the board? In which case, so they're going to have to do that sort of upgrade thing where they mail you a loaner CPU ahead of time that's compatible to boot it up. So, yeah, we did it. We won, but it is going to be a confusing, complicated process, unfortunately.
Would you call it a Pyrrhic victory? I'm going to spend more time and money getting my $100 B450 board to accept this higher end Zen 3 than really it was worth to get a B550.
Well, if it saves you a couple $100,
if you're going to Zen 3, okay, Zen 2 already supports PCIe Gen 4. If you're moving all the way up to Zen 3 from Zen 2 on the same older board that doesn't support it, at what point does that feature just not even matter to you? Some of the advanced features that these processors are going to be able to provide are not necessarily going to be available to you if you're on an older platform. So if it's literally I just want the faster CPU. What if it's 10% faster?
AMD lied.
Yeah, I know.
And my upgrade path died. That's all it is.
I love it.
You're still bitter you lost your PCIe 4.0 support.
Yeah, on my X470, sure. The board could have handled it perfectly fine, but then they, you want better performance and better AGISA. Well, you're gonna have to sacrifice something.
That's something they did not back down on, because that was very unpopular.
Yeah,
when they made that announcement. That was one of those community updates where they said we're dropping support for PCIe Gen 4 on pre-500 series motherboards. Sorry, basically. And they explained why, and it's a technical issue, it was a signaling issue. It was that some boards absolutely could support it, but not all. So then it would create fragmentation. Well, guess what? You're creating, and by the way, check off that bingo square for the angry rant, if there is one. I think there is. Depends on the version you're looking at for PC per podcast bingo, by the way. Check the
At least
Discord
one.
for more information. But they're
anyhow.
this is going to fragment the market, because to do this, you have to wait. You have to find out if your motherboard vendor is going to support it for your specific motherboard model and probably revision number of that model. And then if they are, okay, then I can go out and buy the processor. Because if they're not going to support it and you buy the CPU, it's not going to work until you get that beta BIOS update. When you get it, and they did not promise it would be at the same time. You may be waiting for a beta BIOS long after the launch. They said they're going to work with the motherboard vendors to create these updates. They said they will develop and enable motherboard partners with the code to support Gen 3 based processors in select beta BIOSes for AMD B450 and X470 motherboards. But in so doing, say you get this beta BIOS. You're one of the lucky people who have a board that will support these. Then when you flash it, there's a huge red flag here. It is, you can never go back. If you think that you're going to donate this board to somebody else down the line and give them your, Ryzen 3000 part with it, or, imagine trying to sell this thing on eBay later and say, yeah, I ended up getting a X570 board. Here's my 470, but I flashed it. So even though it's a 470, you can only use it with a Zen 3 processor and not a Zen 2. That the secondary market is basically dead for those boards at that point, because there is no way to go back, apparently. I don't know if a BIOS flashback, like one of the USB-based flashes, will work, because there are certain boards where you can flash back the BIOS even without a CPU or RAM installed. I've actually done that before.
You can always pull the chip.
No,
but you'd need
You can desolder
it. Those bastards are soldering them on now, aren't they?
Yeah, they are now.
I still have an old puller that I used to use when things went horribly wrong.
I think I actually have a BIOS chip within arm's reach here, but we don't have to go down that road.
Yeah, it might be about right there.
I mean, it is like
close to another square on the bingo card, by the way, really close.
Yeah,
I know.
All right. So anyway, let's Sebastian grabs his chip. Yeah, we'll.
I've got a BIOS.
Oh, those are old ones.
Oh, the keyboard. These are for a 386. Yep. But anyway.
All right. So
they used to be socketed.
So if you were upset about this, if this was going to affect you, there looks like there will be a remedy, potentially. Again, depending on your motherboard manufacturer support. But so stay tuned. There's more to come on this.
As Jim desperately tries to move this hour-and-a-half long podcast along.
2 stories in. Jeez.
I know.
All right, well,
we need to just
Let's move on. So let's turn back to Intel for a second. So Intel, obviously, they say what you will about Intel, but they've got great networking. And another company that we've covered a lot is Rivet Networks. They own the Killer brand of networking, and they've partnered with Intel in the past. They were formerly owned by Qualcomm. Lately, they've been partnering with Intel for both wireless and wired Ethernet products. And just today, Intel announced that they have acquired Rivet. The details were not disclosed, so we don't know the pricing or the terms, but they've gone and bought them. And so expect to see, I assume that they're going to continue to push Killer products. Actually, I don't know if they'll kill.
Yep, they said they're
okay.
They took over the brand as well. So
right, I just don't know if down the road they'd want to stick with that brand, or if they try to incorporate the software side of Killer into their own products for things like prioritization and network extension.
So the the press release goes into that a little bit, but it does sound like they specifically acquired the killer brand and the software. I mean, they bought the whole company, but they have all the IP. So we could very well be seeing like a new enhanced Intel gaming network control center or something with prioritization.
And the best killer products of the last year and a half have been Intel hardware. So,
Yeah,
The AX
and
chip was in there.
Intel bought up McAfee, and we had killer
Mhm.
software development based on Intel buying McAfee.
No,
Yeah,
no,
that's,
Was he
that's
ever
so
convicted?
wonderful.
was that? I thought that was just a rumor.
Not yet.
he left the country,
Yeah,
didn't
he's
he?
somewhere in the jungle.
Yeah, so he's fine.
Okay. Well,
And
anyway,
still making commercials.
Let's continue
Still
moving on
experimenting
here.
with insane mental stimulation.
And mind-altering
Chemical
jokes. Yes.
patterns. Yeah.
Yep. hmm Better living through chemistry.
All right, back to
He's modding his brain
yes,
just to tease
yes.
somebody.
They can't stop the signal. You can't.
No. All right. Real quick, also here we've got another story. Corsair, they've come out with they're constantly pushing memory capacities and speeds. They've come out with a new Vengeance. It's the Vengeance LPX DDR4 5000. So it's a 5,000 megahertz rated kit. It's pricey. You're going to pay for it. It's $1,000 for a 16 gig dual channel kit.
Whoa.
And the timings aren't great. I mean, they're pretty good for
those
that
are
fast, but
Jim, for those speeds,
that's
great.
Yeah, at
Fast
5
speed.
gigahertz.
yeah.
The
So it's
sub
eight,
timings are 26. I mean, that's not, but you have to just factor. Like I've been testing with 16, 18, 1836, and that's only at 3200. So
okay.
to only move
So-
up to 18, 26, 26, 46 at 5,000 is pretty good.
Yeah. Now the reason we brought this up too is that Tech Power Up got they tested this kit and they tested it with Ryzen in mind because, as we've talked about, the memory frequency is crucial for Ryzen, and higher is not always necessarily better. You kind of want to dial it in to the F clock frequency, and that would equal 3,600 megahertz. And so if you go above that, the question becomes, can you overcome any latency deficiencies from a mismatch by just pumping that memory frequency up? And they looked into it and found that potentially you can. Jeremy, tell us what's going on with the Tech Power Up review of this.
Well, I mean, you can. That in that, it topped the charts by a good percent. But see, the theory behind it is that when they ran it at DDR4 5000, which straight out booted XMP enabled, which is brilliant for, if you've played with Ryzen, and sometimes it doesn't like your memory, and it becomes an interesting little wrestling match. But in this case, boom, booted up, no problem. So the front side bus to DRAM ratio, or the Infinity Fabric to, was 3 to 75. So it's even. It's not some sort of a wacky divider that you have that is just really, really hard to deal with. And it looks brilliant. But honestly, and you're looking at the charts on the video, and you sort of heard my comment on the audio, is that often it's being beaten by 3600 megahertz RAM with tighter timings. So it's still the fact that, when you uncouple the RAM frequency from that Infinity Fabric, Ryzen don't like it very much. Now, on the flip side, it runs at 5,000, so you drop it down to 3,600. You tighten the timings. They tightened it to 1818, 1843. Not too shabby. All of a sudden, it was performing better than it was at 5,000 megahertz. It was performing better than the 3,600 megahertz kits that they were trying. So yes, you can actually get some amazing performance out of it. And like, you look at the memory latency, it goes from 7.25 nanoseconds down to 68.3. The memory copy isn't so great, the write isn't so great, but the read jumps from 48,702 megabytes a second to over 5,200 or 52,000 rather. Sorry. So you can do it, but you're paying $1,000 for two 8 gig DIMMs. If you need the absolute fastest, this will do it. it's kind of silly. And you've still got G.Skill. We saw the Trident Z at, what was it, 5200 megahertz at the last CES. Still hasn't launched. You still can't find it anywhere. It's also because these are the very pretty ones that they do with the crystalline tops. I think they actually sent me an email today I didn't get to take a look at, but apparently they're going faster than this. But you can't find them. And there's a part of it is because, yes, it is the fastest on the planet. It's $1,000 for 16 gigs of RAM. And you're not going to ever get that.
Wouldn't you pay a little extra for the fastest car on the planet? I mean, there's this premium attached to this.
Yeah,
my Mazda 3 is probably better price performance than a Ferrari, but it's not going to beat a Ferrari.
Let's not even talk about
an
RX-7.
Yeah. Maybe if it was an RX-7, it would be.
You can't tell the girls about your head-turning memory timings. It doesn't work.
It's true. I don't think they really care.
You don't hang out with my crowd.
Yeah, you haven't found the right girl, Brett.
You know, you're right.
I haven't found the right guy who, I guess I could talk to Jeremy about memory. I used to think it was cool to benchmark memory, but I mean, look at where that.
And then you started doing it, didn't you?
I know.
And then it became just tedious.
Tedious.
Painful.
Tedious.
The real world implication of fast RAM outside of
it was an incredibly awful, boring meeting that inspired this long post about the memory, by the way. Because actually, by the time I finished, I'm like, holy crap, I can't believe I wrote that much.
Hey, you know what, though?
Oh, right, because I wasn't wanting to pay attention to this.
Wait.
No RGBs. That Vengeance LPX
I don't think I broke the
RGB free.
600 or whatever.
Yeah, it is. Corsair, although Corsair does RGBs pretty well. Their Capellix stuff on the Dominator RGB looks pretty classy.
Yep.
So, but all right, well, check that out if you have the money to burn and you can find a configuration that works for you where it makes sense. 5,000 megahertz memory, at least until that G.Skill stuff eventually shows up at 52. But
then it'll be better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a? Just double checking there isn't a. No, because sorry, Frank, I didn't look at the DDR4 memory post that you sent me today. But yeah, so this is a DDR4 5000 as well.
Okay. What's that?
G.Skill.
The G.Skill
they've
stuff.
Okay. The Trident Z. They just released a new update today. Which a DDR4 4400 at CL17. Something like 17, 18, 18, 38.
That's real good.
On an i9-10900K. That's
more sub-timing talk coming in hour 3, by the way.
Yeah. Might have to look at that again.
It's riveting. It's riveting. You're going to want to take notes out there.
Right. That Intel killer news was riveting.
He heard me talking. He just sent me another one. DDR4 6666.
Whoa. That's big. This is big. You heard it here first, folks, if you're watching live.
Okay, there you go.
That's under NDA. Check the embargo date on that.
Oh, yeah.
Jeremy.
Wait, Jesus, Jeremy.
You got to lead out with the embargo date, or, you just sent me an email, man. I'm sorry.
Whoops.
And no, there isn't anything.
I tend not to read my PC per email live.
Yeah, not a good idea. Not a good idea.
Oh,
right, well,
I'm just kidding. I saw
stream of consciousness kind of thing.
Okay.
Before we lose Josh, let us finish this show.
I thought he passed out. He's still here?
He regained consciousness.
He's in a slight coma.
All right. So if you guys recall, earlier this year, Samsung launched the latest line of their T-Series SSDs. These are these portable, real thin and light USB external drives. And the big thing with the T7, which was the new one this year, was that there was two things. It was NVMe and USB 3.2 Gen 2, so 1,000 megabyte per second transfers, and it had a fingerprint sensor. It was called the T7 Touch, and it worked really well. We reviewed it a couple months ago. The fingerprint sensor was responsive. The drive performed well. A really nice little product, but it was pricier than competing drives in that same performance class because of that fingerprint sensor. And Samsung promised at the time that they were going to come out with a non-touch, just the standard Samsung T7, and that's what they did just yesterday. They launched it. It's available in 500 gigabyte, 1 terabyte, and 2 terabyte capacities, and that's $110 for the 500. 200 for the 1 terabyte and $370 for the 2 terabyte. And you get your choice of colors. There's red, blue, and gray. and it's identical. So go back and read our review of the Touch. Everything else about it is identical in terms of speed and design, size. Just that it doesn't have that fingerprint sensor. So you're saving $20 to $30 depending on the model, and that does put it into the price range of its competing NVMe external SSDs. So just a great option if you want something like that. If you need something fast and portable, but don't need the fingerprint, you can still secure it with software and passwords. It just doesn't have the fingerprint stuff. Oh,
I'm loving the caption this still in our Discord right now. It's great.
All right, and looks like the folks over at Ars Technica attempted to answer the age-old question of ZFS versus RAID, and Jeremy found that story for us and wrote it up for us. So, what did they find when you're looking at Linux and you're looking to build an array, a storage array, ZFS versus traditional RAID? What's the answer, Jeremy?
Holy crap, it's a lot faster. And not just a little. If you really are serious about storage, like our dear departed Alan, who is just no longer with us, he's still with us. The difference between these are utter night and day. It's not really even a comparison when you look at it. There's a very steep learning curve. It's not quite the same as a plug and play RAID, and there's a lot of different versions. You have, like Ars Technica pointed out, that the version that they're using is roughly 2 years old. It's not the latest and greatest, but when you look at just the utter performance of it, there's no question. They slapped this with some Seagate Iron Wolf hard disk drives. They avoided Western Digital for this for some reason, and paired it with an LSI 9300 8i to do the rating. So it's not software; it's completely and totally hardware. They ran it with 4K and 1 meg block sizes, a variety of I/O depths, just so that you could see how everything works. And even when you're looking at RAID 10, it just blows it out of the water. It's utter and complete craziness. You really want to take a look through it, because there are certain instances where you're going to find a swap in the performance, but for the most part, it's just it's not gonna compare. And if you've never really encountered this before, ZFS is more than just a RAID manager. It's your file system. It's the logical volume manager. It's everything all in one. And if you've got everything set up right, you take 8 disks, you plug it in, and in under 30 seconds, it's built, done, configured, and saying, hey, if you want to throw some more disks in, go right ahead. I'm good for you. Even RAID 10 isn't quite that forgiving. So it's very interesting if you're looking at building your own sort of a FreeNAS system. If you're looking at a Plex server, if you're looking at just digging around and saving everyone's files for miles around, take a peek at it.
And that's the very in-depth article by Jim Salter over at Ars Technica. We'll have a link to that. We'll have a link to pretty much everything we mentioned in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. I'm well aware of the advantages of ZFS, but I can never. I'm not technical enough to use it. I'm afraid. I got a couple mirrored pools set up once, but then something went wrong, and I didn't know the command lines to fix it. So that's where that ended.
Yeah, if you want a GUI, then go back to RAID. It's going to be a little better for you. Or storage spaces.
Yep. Brett, do you have any thoughts on ZFS? It seems something up.
Yeah,
your
if you want to
alley.
be elite, you should go ZFS. Command line. It's nothing to be scared. It's nothing to be scared of. You should just embrace the command line. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of command
your inner
lines,
Linux.
If you want,
and they haven't deprecated them all in Linux either, which is nice.
Exactly. Which is a beautiful segue, Jim. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. So speaking of command lines, if you want to use one in Windows, the new Windows terminal is here. It's been a year. It was last May, I think it was May 2019, where they first teased the new terminal, and they had a very slick little trailer, and it's very exciting, and it's been in beta, and now it's stable, and you can go get it from the Windows Store. So it brings
No.
tabs. What's that?
No.
No.
And that leading.
This is the only thing I would even consider going to the Windows Store for, but no.
Well,
it almost looks ray traced in that first picture, but
that's from a trailer.
Oh, okay.
That they made it. It's not quite this slick. It doesn't, that gives it some 3-dimensionality. It does have.
It's not even a real light.
Right. It does have new styling options, so you can do sort of like a translucent blurred window, and you can style your text, and the text rendering is improved. There's GPU acceleration for the text rendering, but it brings all kinds of stuff that's been long absent from Windows in the command line. It's tabs, the ability to open traditional command prompts alongside PowerShell, alongside Windows Subsystem for Linux stuff. It's got multiple panes, split panes, better zooming. Here's that background. If you're watching the video, you can see that it gives you some optional ways to style it to your liking. So a lot of interesting features there that you can pick up, and then
it's almost as good as the stock Mac terminal now. Wow,
it's better.
Was that allowed? I didn't mean to say that.
But despite Jeremy's objections, you can go to the Windows Store here, and you can get it. It's free, obviously. But they're distributing it through the Windows Store, so we'll have a link to that as well. Okay, final story, real quick here. We mentioned Plex a minute ago in terms of what you might want to use a ZFS-based array for, but Plex has a new feature out just today, and it's a Plex Pass feature, so it is limited in how you can use it. But if you have a Plex Pass, they've introduced automatic intro skipping. This is something obviously you've seen if you've used something like Netflix, but they're bringing this to your own local library. So it's enabled in the Plex media server, the latest version. You may have to restart your server. I had to restart it to get this to show up in the options. But basically, you go into your settings and enable it, and then it goes through and does an audio heuristic analysis. And because it knows what show it is, it knows what to look for in terms of an audio cue, and then that guesses as to where the intro is. And then you'll get a little skip intro button so that you can, if you're binging a show, you don't have to, sit through the 90-second intro every episode. So very handy there. And I've only started the analysis on my library. I haven't had a chance to really test it yet, but initial reports I've seen on the Reddit, the Plex subreddit, were pretty positive. And but again, it's you have to have a Plex server on the server side and on the client side. So you have to. It's something, if you have a server for your friends, they're going to have Plex Pass to use this. But check out the support article to see all the details. Picks of the week. Okay, picks of the week. I'll start. This is a video I found of somebody who had a little cabin fever with all the quarantining. So he sat down and decided to record, video capture the installation and upgrade of every Windows version going all the way back to 1.0. And when I say every Windows version, I'm not talking because we've seen before, all the major versions, going from XP to Me to or Me to XP or whatever. No, he went every version, including developer releases, betas. There's dozens or hundreds here of all of the builds. I
still remember when Windows 95 was codenamed Chicago.
Yeah.
Yep.
Windows Chicago.
And he records himself going
before
through.
Vista was what, Seattle?
Memphis, Whistler.
Wasn't Vista Longhorn, or was Longhorn 7?
Longhorn
Project
was
was
Vista.
Longhorn 7.
Yeah. But this is a 2-hour video, 2 hours and 3 minutes, and it's highly sped up because it took, I think he said 200 hours or something to put this all together.
Where's the real-time version?
Well, you can just download it.
I guess you can watch it at slower speed. Yeah, it's true. Okay.
It starts slowly but gets faster over years.
Yes. So if you're interested in seeing what the interfaces look like and the installation process, it's an interesting little piece of history there. And then, of course, if you want to get these, a lot of these older builds, like beta builds and developer releases, are available at a website called WinWorld. and you can cut over there and grab all. It's all the older stuff, but there's lots of Windows 2000, and there's different betas and release candidates that you can download. So if you want to emulate this yourself, or if you want to run an old version for some reason, you can grab a lot of them there. Okay, Josh, what have you got for us for your pick?
Considering availability of Intel CPUs, if you're just been waiting, just get an R9 3900X. It's $400. After special, you can find them. It's just a really good processor for what you get. I wouldn't really consider getting a 3950 unless you really could utilize those extra threads, because your boost clocks are essentially all the same. And so in, gaming and other stuff like that, you're doing well. And I would do the 3600X, but Newegg sold out on those. So there's been a run lately. And when you look at the Sebastian's review, you kind of look at that particular processor and how well it does throughout pretty much everything, and for the price you can get it for, usually around $199 to $209. That's a solid build. But anyway, no, if you've been holding out and saving all of your pennies, the 3900X is going to last you a very long time.
All right, Jeremy, what's your pick?
Out of desperation again, because bloody hell, there's nothing to pick recently, is a wonderful website that I've known about for a very long time, back when it was actually free to stream their music, as opposed to a relatively inexpensive yearly membership. But Wolfgang's Vault is Spotify for us of a certain age. It's an insane guy who used to do sound for a immense amount of people. And so he was doing bootleg copies off of the soundboard. He then, through his friends, also did bootlegs off of the soundboard, and has eventually had to go, official, hence the cost. But if you take a look through the list of concerts that are available, it is insane. It spans from the 50s until today. Not every single performer that you've loved has signed up with them to say it's okay, but the vast majority of them have. I think at last count he was up to about 14,000 artists, each with numerous live concerts that you can sit there and listen to as long as you feel like. They also do channels, hence the Spotify reference, where if you want to listen to their blues, if you want to listen to country, if you want to listen to rock, if you want to listen to early rock, if you want to listen to crossover bluegrass rock, it's all there. It's utterly and completely amazing. And if you're old enough to remember a lot of these people, or to be honest, if you're young and just, want to find out where everything came from, it's so friggin' worth it. If you want old concert memorabilia, he's got the original posters from like Jimi Hendrix Experience. He's got original shirts from the band tour. It's utterly ridiculous, and you really should check it out. Even if all you're doing is picking up a couple of bits of memorabilia, but honestly, it's seriously for the music.
All right. So
I was more excited about Big Head Todd and the Monsters when I saw it up there.
Hey,
actually,
they're there.
I know
they are there.
Wolfgangs.com, and the subscription is $3.99 a month for the concert audio. So that's not too bad if that's your thing.
Yeah, it's cheaper if you buy the whole year.
Right.
Yeah.
The more you buy, the more you save. Just had to throw that in.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All you need to know about me is that when you were scrolling, the thing that caught my eye was like, ooh, a 1989 Robert Cray concert. I'd listen to that.
Yeah. Actually a good one.
So, Sebastian, I've got your pick in here. What have you got for us?
Yes. Well, so we were talking about the Windows upgrade experience. What about the Microsoft Office floppy experience?
Ooh.
So if there's a YouTuber who goes by Tech Tangents Now, formerly Akbakuku, and he did this video a while back. It was actually a couple years ago now, where he literally installs Microsoft Office 1997 on a Gateway 2000 laptop, one floppy at a time, in real time for your enjoyment. So if you're bored or if you just want to go to sleep tonight to the sound of a floppy installation of Office, definitely check it out. Because, we don't
Awesome.
all have these fancy newfangled CD-ROM drives on our computers. So,
Well, actually, most of us do not have CD-ROM drive in our computer anymore.
Hey, now.
yeah, it's rare. It's so rare, just like it once was.
One in each system.
And I had no idea that
1998 or 99, the IT guys at my hospital actually did a Windows 95 or 98 install on 3.5-inch floppies. They had 3 stacks, at least 35 to 40 floppies that you had to do if you were going to install the entire thing. It just is, it's ludicrous, but it's funny.
Yep.
Anyway.
And I had no idea. I used to watch the Akabuku, however it's pronounced. I didn't know he changed his name. So, good. You're muted.
Muted. He said he was trying to explain it to people and how to spell it because he started going to more like shows and events, and he's like, "I'm Akbukuku," which was literally a name he came up with once when he had to create a username, and he just randomly selected letters, and that's what he came up with.
So he misspelled
Tech
head desk.
Tangents.
Yeah, so it's good stuff. Check it out. Tech
It's a very good
Tangents, I
channel.
guess.
Yes.
And I guess I haven't checked in with him in a while. I didn't realize. All right, Brett, you've got the last pick for us.
Sure. So if we were properly shilling at this point or someplace during the podcast, we would have talked about the iFixit toolkit that you should go and buy. But instead, everybody's got what they call a Walmart in their hometown. So stick this in your backpack and just go get one of these. It's useful for when you're at your in-laws' house, when you're hanging out at your buddy's place or whatever. It's got every freaking kit bit in it: tri-wing, tiny little triple quad Phillips, and very small six point and hex and all that for taking apart laptops, and it's got plastic and magnetization and sucker pieces, and it's $13. For God's sakes, go put one in your backpack and carry it with you everywhere you go.
Where's the tweezers?
Tweezers, it's in there. Metal tweezers, man.
Okay.
That's right. I'm pointing at them. It's right there. You can't see it. Right over there. Right there. This side. Yeah, right over there. Anyway, I got a couple of them. They're $13 and they take apart laptops when you need to change memory or pull something out or whatever. And they're always useful when you go to your in-laws' house when anybody asks you suddenly to say, "Hey, there's something wrong with my computer. Can you take a look at it?" And you're like, "Okay, whatever." I just constantly wish I'm wearing the "I will not work on your computer" shirt. Otherwise, I'm kind of obliged to do it.
Well, now you can.
Now, if
social
you really
distancing.
want something, my old dear departed friend was a printer. And there are some bizarre proprietary things in this one. I've actually noticed that the old Ford, the Ford proprietary screwdriver, or head rather.
Not sure.
It's in here.
I don't know. This one's got
my mom's Ford Taurus to get in.
This one's got two pins that stick out. It's got a triangle. It's got tri-wing, star bit, 6-point with the security bit in it with the hole in the middle.
Nice.
With the pin.
And you open up a Nintendo cartridge with these bits.
I'm positive you could.
I don't know. I had to buy those separately.
All right, so we'll have a link to that. And that's the Hyper Tough. It's a 77-piece computer repair kit. An iFixit knockoff for only $14 at.
It sounds dumb.
Walmart.
Go get one.
Yes.
Just buy it.
Is it still
if you're spending $80 on screwdrivers, you're getting ripped off. I'm sorry.
That's kind of my point here. It's just buy this, stick it in your backpack, and wherever you go, you're going to go like, I've got a tool for that.
Lowe's sells one under their Cobalt brand that I bought, which is around $25, I think. But,
man, you overpaid.
Apparently.
And is it still trendy to trash Walmart PCs on YouTube? If that's the case, you can buy your PC and your toolkit one-stop shopping. All right. Well,
your toolkit that's required to fix all of the problems with the build in the first place. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, I just heard some noise from upstairs. I think Jensen's waking up and he's coming down, and I'm going to get the hell out of here before that happens. But thanks everyone for joining us. Again, we record these live Wednesdays or Thursdays at 10 p.m. Eastern, 2 a.m. UTC. And we'd love to have you join us live. But if not, you can find the edited on-demand versions of the podcast usually 5 to 6 hours after the live stream. I'm getting pretty efficient at getting them all edited pretty quickly. And my new upload speed here at the new house works a lot better there. So you can find those at pcper.com/podcasts. Videos are posted to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/pcper. And we've got the audio version in the RSS feeds at your favorite podcast app. So anybody have any final?
Jim, and are you announcing anything about a Spotify exclusive at this point, or are we still freely available with every podcatcher?
No, we are not exclusive to any platform. We are on Spotify, although it doesn't seem to update very frequently. I submitted it back when they first started doing podcasts. I submitted the RSS feed, and it's always like 3 weeks behind, and I don't know how to refresh it or force it to.
But are they paying us to be on there?
No, they are not paying.
Would you accept any form of a deal from Spotify?
Yes.
What if they offered you $1,000 just straight up?
Oh, absolutely. You want to give me money? I'll do whatever you want. I've lost the will to old principles. But no one has paid us. We are we remain independent and broke. But we thank you for being here with us.
That's what being independent means.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose.
Now that I have the beard, I could do an apology, or not an apology video, but a heart-to-heart video about my true feelings for Intel. Like one of our colleagues has done. I say colleague, we're not even in the same ballpark.
We don't have 10 million followers on YouTube. No, we don't.
Yet. There's a chance.
But there's options. So thanks everyone for joining us. Please, we hope you continue to be well, be safe, take care of yourself and your families, and we hope to see you here next week.